In Conversation, BFM 89.9, the business station.
Good evening, I'm Caroline O, and our guest today is a man whose profile reads as follows: a lifetime of experience in humor, over 40 years of experience in journalism and marketing communications, passionate and vocal about everything and anything, the chairman and group president of TBWA Tequila, Mr. Austen Zecha. It's very good to have you with us.
Thank you for having me.
All right, so 40 years in advertising, Mr. Zecha. We were talking about this off air just before the interview. I mean, that's quite an accomplishment. I take it you like what you do?
Yes, I should. By now, I have no other choice.
So tell me, is this what you always wanted to do? I mean, being in advertising, what were your ambitions as a child?
Well, not really. I didn't start out to be in advertising. I really wanted to go into sports. And unfortunately, there was no money in those days in professional sports. Even the Olympics really favored amateur sportsmen. And I was never good enough to be either. I did soccer, or football here, of course, tennis, and track and field, or athletics here. And I was never as good as ballet, or as Pete Sampras, or Federer, or as Carl Lewis. So the next best thing was to go into something that kind of kept me competitive and kind of kept me unknowing about how we would fare as and when we would compete. So I suppose I could have gone into entertainment, but I think somehow or rather I fell into this profession.
Okay, so let's take it back a little bit here. You're of, as I understand it, Indonesian, Czech, Dutch descent. Is that right?
Yes, and Chinese too, and Thai.
All right, that's a really interesting mix. Born in Indonesia, Eurasian parents, PR in Malaysia, citizen of the Netherlands. How does that work, Mr. Zecha?
A bit confusing, but yeah, I was born when it was still a Dutch East Indies, Indonesia, before World War II, of Czechoslovakian, Dutch, Indonesian a father and a Malaysian, Chinese, Thai mother. And I guess I never knew any better. And I just grew up, and I was the youngest of 5 boys, so it was kind of natural for me to kind of accept things as they were, if you will.
How much of your heritage are you familiar with?
Quite a bit, because my family, before my father died, commissioned a researcher and writer from the UK to do the research on the family from at least 1850. And so, no, sorry, 1750. 1750 it was, yes. And so, yes, I'm quite familiar with the heritage.
Oh, that's amazing. Okay, so do you live here in town?
Yes, I do. No, I live up in what's called Bukit Tungku, or Kenny Hills.
Okay, and where exactly did you grow up? Because I know that you were in Indonesia and then you left.
Right. Well, I was born in Jakarta. I grew up in Indonesia during the Japanese occupation and during the revolution. I did not leave until I was 12 to go to school, boarding school in the States, following my 4 brothers who were then all over the country. And I stayed in the States studying as well as working for about 20 years. And the rest of the time it's been here in Malaysia or in Southeast Asia.
Okay, so when exactly did you move here to Malaysia?
Originally, I came to Malaysia in 1962. It was Malaya then.
Right.
By the time I left, I was with the Associated Press and the Straits Times Group. It was Malaysia in 64. Then I went back to the States, worked there for the then Attorney General and subsequently Senator Robert Kennedy, and didn't come back to Asia until 71. And I started my first agency in Hong Kong.
Okay, well, that's a pretty amazing career path. I'd like to go down that in just a bit, but you started out as a journalist, you're saying.
That's right.
And from there, you did go to the U.S. to work, like you said, for Robert Kennedy. How did that come about?
Well, I suppose people close to the late President Jack Kennedy and Bobby Kennedy knew about me from my boarding school days in New England. And I had met them prior to even coming to Malaya in '62. So when he came out here in I think it was in, oh gosh, January of '63. It was to try to mediate between Tango who was then Prime Minister of Malaya, to be Prime Minister of Malaysia, and the first President of Indonesia, Sukarno. And I was assigned to cover their visit and their talks, and I was fortunate enough to accompany the then Attorney General to Indonesia for his subsequent talks with Sukarno, and had a couple of days break with him in Bali. And before he left, he asked whether I would write a couple of reports for him about Malaysia and about the Malaya to be Malaysia and about Indonesia, which I did. And I remember I received a nice thank you note from him in February, and in April, however, I received a nice invitation to join his personal staff, and that's when I went back.
Wow, so how did you feel about that?
Well, at that time, being in my early 20s, I thought it was a great opportunity. So I was thrilled. I went back, and mind you though, after a few weeks on the job, came into the office and said, turn the TV on. And I was still in the Department of Justice then, which I did. And there it was in the news that he had resigned as Attorney General. And I thought, gee, this is going to be a very short career. But he was fortunate, I was fortunate enough to have been invited by him to also go with him to New York as we campaigned for his first senatorial campaign.
Okay, so exactly in what capacity did you work with him?
I was known as two things. I was a speechwriter as well as subsequently in the actual campaign itself was '64, and then later I rejoined him also in '68 for the presidential campaign. I was termed an advance man, and that was my responsibility with other advancement to different locations to make sure that everything was in order for his appearance and for his address. So that was kind of exciting.
Well, I'm sure it must have been. So how long were you doing that for?
I worked for him for about a total of 33 months. The first time was for 30 months, and the second time was 3 months for the 1968 presidential campaign until he was assassinated.
Okay. So what was it like working for him? Did you enjoy it? Did you learn a lot?
Yes, I did. I learned most of all two things. He used to say, don't bother me with take-home work. If you have to take home work, it means you didn't pace yourself correctly.
Hear, hear.
Right? And secondly, he said, whatever I assign you to do, always do it as if you have requested it of yourself. Never come to that door and say you can't do it. Because if you have to do it for yourself, you will find ways and means to do it. That is what I consider completed staff work. And that's how he judged me by. And others too. And it was really very, very good for my later life working in advertising.
Okay. So where were you when he was assassinated?
I was with him in Los Angeles. So my assignment was to go back on the first flight the next morning to be, again, the advance man for his return to New York, where we would have a victory homecoming party, because he did win the California primary, but during the course of the night, of course, he died. Okay.
All right. So I'd like to talk about your transition. From there, you decided to leave and go into the corporate line. Is that correct?
No. I left him also. I pleaded poverty when I was working for him because I was on government pay.
Right.
And he managed to get me a job with then the parent company of Exxon, Senatorial company in New Jersey. And but as long as I gave him my word that I would stay in New York and I would be available. So I did that, and while I was working for Kennedy, while I was working for Jersey Standard, Senatorial company in New Jersey, I was assigned to, for some reason, to be the liaison person with their respective ad or PR agencies. And that's when I first got a taste of the agency business, and I thought they were having a lot more fun than I was because they had more clients, and I only had one employer. So I left Exxon in '68, early '68, to join him for the presidential campaign. And then when he was shot, I went back to my old Exxon job, and unbeknownst to me, some people at a rival oil company, then called Mobil Oil, recruited me to join them. And again, I was placed in the same position of being the liaison person dealing with their ad and PR agency. So finally, after 2 more years of that, by January of '71, I came back to Asia, started my first agency in Hong Kong.
Okay. I'd like to talk about the advertising landscape back then. I'm sure it was very, very different. But before we go into that, I'm going to play the first song that you chose for us this evening. And this is A Very Special Love by Johnny Nash. What does the song mean to you?
Very Special Love by Johnny Nash. Oh, that's not one of my songs.
It was on your list.
Is it on my list?
Yes.
No. No, I'm not a Johnny Nash. I'm not a Johnny Nash fan, but.
Okay, I can play another one. You have Blue Tango on your
Blue
list?
Tango, yes.
By Arthur.
When there's Leroy Anderson, but it was recorded by Arthur Fiedler and his Boston Pops. Okay, but the composer is Leroy Anderson. Blue Tango is significant to me because when I arrived in the United States for the very first time at the age of 12, I came by boat, and as soon as the boat was able to pick up a New York radio broadcast, that was the very first song I ever heard in the United States, the Blue Tango.
Oh, that's lovely. Any questions for the chairman and group president of TBWA Tequila, Austen Zecha? Send us a text 016-201-9000 or tweet us at BFM Radio. Here it is, the Blue Tango on BFM 89.9.